This is a really interesting test from Thomas Kurz to establish your structural and skeletal anatomy um, in order to achieve middle splits. The first part of the test is to establish whether middle splits are possible for you. These are examples of how the leg can sit in the hip bone in different ways, which will influence your possibility of getting middle splits. So in order to establish whether you can do middle splits, you just need to be able to lift your leg parallel to your hip. Just pop it up there and see if it works. And the second part is to find your angle. So basically you need to pop your foot up on a height parallel with your hip and find the angle where both hip flexors can face forward. So that might be a little shallower, like me, it's quite shallow, my position, my middle splits position. That means that I have to bring my foot forward in order for both hips to point forward. If I open my leg at 180 degrees, you can see that the back hip starts to twist. So that's the point we're looking for. How much can we externally rotate that leg without allowing the opposite hip to start to twist inward and without letting the hip of the extended leg raise up. So you can see that that's my angle there. Whereas if I try to open the leg even more, I start to have to compromise on the other side. So my angle from 180 degrees is slightly less. It's more shallow straddle. So this is your hip socket and this is the leg of the bone. And if the leg of the bone sits in your hip socket very tight or very deep, you will have less room to move. But if it's sitting a little shallower, you will have a little bit more room to move. And then some people whose leg just sits very shallow in the socket, they're going to have a lot more range of motion there. So depending on where that angle is, will influence how you approach your middle splits training, or how we approach your middle splits training. So for example, because my angle is shallower, I need to work more on posterior tilt to keep the chest up over the legs. Whereas somebody with a deeper range will be able to keep their a more anterior tilt or a more straight position, and not have to rely so much on the arch of the back in order to maintain the position. So this is an interesting graphic with a couple of things going on, but the one that I'm most interested in is the middle icon, where the pelvis is tilted forward or the posterior is tilted back. The knees are flexed and the feet are pointed forward. You can also think about doing this with knees straight. So just to clarify the different splits positions, this is a pancake position. This would be more like a box splits position. This is your side split overcoming isometric position. Trying to get the hips lower than the knees and the feet as wide as possible. This is your middle splits position, attempting to keep the chest upright with posterior tilt and toes facing forward. You can see I'm still working on getting my hands off the floor. So for me, with my range, it's unlikely that I'll be able to, well, I won't, because the test has confirmed that I won't be able to extend or open the legs back so that they're directly 180 degrees, in line with the hips. But I can still achieve a standing middle splits with the posterior tilt method. And basically the only reason I have my hands on the ground here, I'd like to be totally upright, arms crossed or indeed holding a weight or something, but I'm still gaining strength in my legs. But hopefully those examples help clarify the difference between side or middle splits, box splits, horse stance position, pancake position. They're all related, but there's a few different things going on.